Okay, welcome to the April 1st, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. The first item on the agenda is the minutes dated March 4th, 2025. Anybody have a chance to review the minutes? Any comments?
No comments.
No comments. Chris, any comments on the meeting minutes?
Oh, no comments, thanks.
Okay. I have no comments as well. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes, that's written.
Second, okay. Motion and seconded. Do we have any public comment on the minutes?
No public comment.
Okay, great. All those in favor of approving the March 4th, 2025 minutes?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is zoning hearing board 673, 131 Leonard Drive. Hi.
Hi. Good evening.
Did I-
Oh, we're supposed to just.
Yeah, just.
What you're doing?
Yeah, go.
We're Andrew Seeger. We're at 131 Lenape Drive. And we're here hoping to get approval to do an expansion of our kitchen, which would include an additional little expansion off of a current existing very awkward size space that is on our back property right now.
It's like a half gazebo that is, with windows. At the time, it was suited for,
1991 is when we
but it's been very difficult to kind of manage that, now with two little ones. So we're looking to just kind of, square it off
Yeah,
and, not
open up
go.
the space slightly so that we can have better access and flow for the whole kitchen, because it's also a step down too. Like there's a step down, it gets tripped, people can't get in and out of it, and it's not properly insulated, it's cold. We just tried have our kids back there just earlier, and they're like, it's so cold over here, because it's got 5 windows all around it, but
I could just show you what it looks like now, and I don't know if you had an aerial view of it. But
Yeah.
we're basically trying to square that off. And we're working with an architect, and we tried to save that and design internally with using that, it just didn't work for the flow of the house. So I don't know if we need to. Oh,
Yeah, I
you want
got
to do
it.
it? I'm
Yep.
sorry.
You did have it included.
You guys included a lot of.
we tried to put in as much
Give you
information.
a visual,
We're like,
yeah.
This is.
And we did, again, try to use that and keep that. We weren't aware that this had gone through a variance until, our site engineer had talked to zoning and then told us that it was a variance that got approved back in 91. And that, adding on would require another variance. And like I said, it's not to expand these, past the setback, it's just to widen
Widen
that.
it.
A quick question for you is, it looks like your impervious is staying almost the same. So are you removing some impervious from some other area?
Yeah, there's, coming up on the driveway, there is an area that, will be removed. As
Okay.
well as the access from the garage around the house to the back.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
area will be also removed.
Looked like a lot of the wall was coming down or something, marked as a wall on the drawing.
Chris, can you repeat that? It's hard to hear you.
I
Sorry.
thought I saw something marked as a wall was coming down. Flagstone / walls. After
Well, it's
that,
kind of, because in our back, it slopes, next to the garage, it slopes down, so the flat stone has like a wooden little small wall, if you will. It's like, wooden
Okay.
lumber, timberland,
Mhm.
and that would be what he was talking about, to be removed and all that area.
Like a railway tie.
Yeah, railroad.
Railroad tie. That's what they do.
I think it's in the photo, yeah.
I don't think you can see that in the photo.
It's
No,
over, is there a tree, let me see.
Is it around the tree?
Yeah, it's around the tree area.
Okay,
So-
so is it on the top here? Like
That we've tried when.
Yeah,
not
right in that
area.
area, yep, all that, and then since it slopes down, they had to try to even it out, so that's why there's a small wall, if you will.
Got it.
Chris, do you have any questions?
No, I reviewed everything. I thought it looked pretty good.
Yeah,
I don't have any questions or problems with it.
I agree with Chris. I think it's a very small expansion. I mean, at the end of the day, you're gonna be removing impervious coverage. You're gonna net with less impervious coverage than what's currently there. So I have absolutely no problems with this. Yeah, and you need to make a motion, right? Yeah. All right, so I make a motion to approve the plan as submitted. Is that what it's called?
Recommended, are we recommending it to zoning?
Correct,
Recommend the plan as submitted to the zoning hearing board. Does that work?
yes.
Okay. Wait a second.
Second?
Any public comment?
No public comment.
Chris, you have any comments? I see that,
Nope.
right?
It's good. I'm good with it.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carried.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
you.
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you, guys.
All right, next item on the agenda is the draft pickleball ordinance.
So I'll introduce this. Several months ago, the Board of Supervisors had adopted an ordinance in the noise section pertaining to pickleball to limit the noise from 8 AM to 7 PM Monday through Friday and 8 AM to 5 PM Saturdays and Sundays. Another recommendation that they are proposing to adopt is the definition of pickleball as well as any improvements pertaining to pickleball would go through the conditional use process in order for the Board of Supervisors or the town to have, certain conditions upon playing the sport. So this is the draft ordinance that has been prepared by the township solicitor. It is currently being reviewed by the Chester County Planning Commission for any comments, and it is going in front of the Easttown Township Planning Commission for any concerns or comments that they would like to recommend to the Board of Supervisors prior to a formal vote for adoption.
Want to start?
Yeah, I have a number of comments and questions about this. Tom, is there any way, like, I know that I understand that there's a lot of concern with the noise from the pickleball, but is there any way to kind of ask or even require pickleball players uses to, at certain times of the day to, like, now they have like new, like, noiseless balls or noiseless rackets. Is there any way to do that without the conditional use process?
I don't think so, unless it was some other amendment to a different town, like create a different ordinance. In
Mhm.
other words, it wouldn't be in zoning,
Mhm,
it would be some kind of, public welfare ordinance in the code.
mhm,
So I think it's probably possible.
mhm.
It
I mean, I guess-
it would be unusual.
Yeah, I guess unless there was like unless they violated the noise control, they'd have to be using the silent ones, right? But there's not really.
Well, I don't know the history of this, but I take it that just controlling the noise hasn't been satisfactory, or trying to control with a noise ordinance.
So the genesis is to prevent any future situations where their pickleball is created where it could cause issues.
But this zoning ordinance amendment will not necessarily affect existing pickleball courts.
It will not, it will be for future, so
And that's
any.
purposeful, so purposefully, for better or for worse, purposefully selected to prevent what happened at the Y was, the courts were built, and then after they were built, it was determined to be problematic from the perspective of some. This would put the conversion before the process with conditional use. And then presumably some of the things, like the things you identified, could be worked into the conditional use.
So I feel like my issue is that you could say basketball and bouncing a basketball could be loud and offensive as well. And I understand pickleball it's a hot topic and people are upset about it and upset about the boinking noise or whatever. But I think that with that complaint, that technology is getting better and like paddles and balls are better. And I feel like the noise complaint, I understand why they're trying to do it, but I feel like the noise, I don't think you can, I don't feel comfortable that you can single out pickleball.
Well, this is actually requiring anyone who wants to put in pickleball to put in a noise abatement program. So all the things that you're talking about as part of the conditional use is to say, okay, you're going to use soft rackets, soft balls, acoustic blankets. So it's doesn't hinder anyone from putting up a pickleball court. It just requires them to have a noise abatement program.
That's the logic of it, for as I see it, for better or for worse.
Then maybe that should be said in there.
Maybe Bill, you have an idea?
It is said in there. It said,
Noise study costs?
Yeah, I will just say that it isn't just that, right? You have to go through conditional use process,
Well,
with
yeah.
public hearings, you
Yeah.
pay for a stenographer, you do all that
Yeah.
sort of thing as well. It's conditional use process is subjective, because the idea is it's supposed to look at you know, a use that needs discussion.
Mhm.
So to me, it's not a great process.
I have concerns with the way that the ordinance is written. I think it's extremely broad. It applies to every use in the township, every zone in the township. Well, I think it might be a good idea to have it in some residential areas. I don't know that you should be having you should be requiring conditional use for an exercise activity in the village of Berwyn or in other commercial areas. I'm also concerned that it requires conditional use for pickleball even in a fully enclosed structure. You know,
I think it's saying it's exempting that one, Mike.
No, it says that, if you read it, it says. In subsection A, it says the provisions of this chapter and of the Easttown Code for such fully indoor athletic uses and activities shall nonetheless apply.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I misread that. I read it as exempt. I apologize. But I
So,
think it's
so I mean, I
just saying
I think
you gotta
that
have
this
a
is-
noise program.
There was just a very stringent. Amendment to the noise ordinance passed in January.
Yes, unrelated to any of this though. So the pickleball was determined not to violate the components of the noise ordinance, which is part of why it's before you.
Was there
What was
a reason, Don, like what?
Didn't trigger it has robust numeric requirements, and the robust numeric requirements were not triggered.
And it's not continuous.
I don't remember this, like, but it was like, believe me, we spent a lot of
Yeah.
time talking about the sound it makes and the engineering behind it.
So this one that just got enacted in January, it's not taking care of the problem with pickleball?
Well, years back, they changed the order, there have been two changes, this is the third. A couple of years back, you changed, you took it out of zoning and you put it into, took it out of zoning so that it would be the police could enforce it. The numeric requirements all stayed the same, nothing changed, it was a procedural enforcement aspect. Most recently, they changed the time. So pickleball becomes, so you have 7 or 8 problematic sound items that are specifically, you have special sound requirements. The classic example is leaf blower. So everybody has leaf blower, it's a positive thing. You have special requirements on leaf blowers because presumably they're annoying and problematic to some. So maybe a few months back, this was treated as like a leaf blower or a snowmobile or something that's loud and annoying, and specific time limits were placed on it. So no changes to the numeric criteria, just time limits. So you're not allowed to make not allowed to make noise with your leaf blower after 7. You're not allowed to make pickleball noise after 7.
Yeah.
Same logic. This is another way of getting to a similar problem. Won't do anything doesn't affect the numeric requirements. It doesn't affect the procedures. All it does
Just put in
is
the extra level.
push it through conditional use,
Yeah.
presumably so that you as the public can say what you need to say to control it. You know, there was some thought that if you put it through conditional use, you might put it in areas where it's less problematic. You might build things that mitigate it. You might put requirements on it that mitigate it. So for better or for worse, that was the logic. Now, you're supposed to opine on whatever you think is important, so it's not like you gotta only opine on the very narrow logic that's as it was presented. You're here to opine on it any way that you feel fit.
Yeah, I mean, while we're talking about this, I also, in subsection B, I'm concerned about the way that that's written as well. Where it says conditional use approval shall be required. Whether the pickleball outdoor surface activity is to be conducted on a playing surface which is proposed to be newly installed, to be converted from existing tennis or other racket court surfaces or facilities, or to be played on any other existing or proposed outdoor surface. That to me is a little vague, or I don't know, vague
Is
is the
that like
right
if
word.
you put lines on your driveway and
Yeah.
like this ordinance?
Yeah,
Yes.
It's meant to cover everything.
It's meant to cover that. And that's, you know, again, purposeful. That's the intention that, you could have a hard surface
But the
that
word,
gets repainted.
the word existing, for to be played on any existing surface. So, conditional use approval shall be required when playing pickleball on any existing surface.
That's what it says, right? So if you wanted to play it on your driveway, you would need conditional use approval.
Or if you're playing
and
pickleball
you
now,
have to do a study, an acoustical study to play on your driveway.
but if you're playing pickleball now,
Ridiculous,
Sort of,
And send notices to all your neighbors.
yeah.
Have a public
it's
hearing.
ridiculous.
yeah. Now, just think about this for a second. If somebody's kids are out hitting a pickleball, I would be very surprised if that's gonna trigger, you know, the purpose of that section was to capture that conversion. Somebody's painting a basketball court or a parking lot and converting it. There's an element of, you know, sometimes that's where you are, like somebody would play pickleball. Hey, like my 10-year-old was playing pickleball with his neighbor at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. And somebody might look at that and demand that Colleen and I intervene. I don't know that we would look at that and think that we're stopping, you know, we play pickleball out here at the camp. And we don't, nobody gets arrested for it, or, you know, that provision is intended to prevent the conversion. And purposefully, it was purposefully made broad so that, because you could imagine you are living next to somebody who has a driveway or a tennis court, they restripe it for pickleball and they're playing pickleball at 10 o'clock, 30 feet from your bedroom window.
Yeah.
So it's got some pitfalls. Everybody knows it has pitfalls and imperfections. It's just that probably some of them were purposeful to capture the intent.
I just feel like a noise ordinance is what should. What should be triggering an issue, not specifically pulling out pickleball.
So, all good, that's why they have you to, and then what a noise ordinance won't trigger this is what the determination is.
But wouldn't it if they're playing after 10 o'clock at night?
I mean,
But
they
you're
can't
allowed to play. It's
That one
within
is
certain time.
unaffected by this. No one is allowed to play pickleball after the hours specified, in that based upon the
Right.
revision that was made. So this was analyzed and just determined not to try to use, there was, like, we could have super robust science, we could, super powerful measurements of the noise and super orchestrated ways of measuring it. And it was just determined that that wasn't a realistic way to evaluate the noise. So we have a sound meter, we go out with the meter, we measure it, and it didn't violate the provisions of the code.
So is this, the new path because in the sound ordinance, it wasn't, because it was still generating complaints,
I
but,
think so, I think if the noise ordinance had been able to control it, then there would be no reason to change the way that you're controlling it. So there was a recognition that it didn't trigger the noise, it was determined by us to not be a violation. That doesn't mean that you couldn't hire a team from MIT
yeah,
to come in and determine that it is a violation. But we have the police, they go out with a meter, they look at the
Yeah.
meter and they read the meter.
Yeah.
And the pickleball sound doesn't trigger the meter to the numeric requirements specified in your code.
Yeah.
Hence the alternative way of enforcing it.
I mean, I'm sensitive to the concerns of the people who are near the pickleball places that are being played. I am not comfortable at all with this proposed ordinance.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to sell it to you, I'm just trying to help you
Yeah,
understand.
I'm just
Yeah,
staking my
very good.
position. For the reasons I pointed out. I think it's extremely broad. It applies to the entire township, it applies to indoor spaces. I think that that's unreasonable. I hate the fact that, somebody on a 10-acre property who might want to put in a pickleball court has to go and get a professional sound study, but if they put in a tennis court, they're fine.
don't.
Like, it's just,
Right.
it doesn't, it's a little. I think, I don't think it's little, I think it's very cumbersome, and I do think that, I mean, if the existing noise ordinance. Well, I'm not gonna talk about that, but,
Well, I think you suggested at the beginning that maybe it could be controlled by some other methodology,
Yeah.
other ordinance.
like,
So, and I'm not familiar with the new technology
Yeah.
on pickleball. But there are noise ordinances that, for example, you can't run a lawnmower without a muffler.
yeah,
Right.
So I think that probably you can impose in the noise ordinance that if you're playing pickleball, you have to use certain sound mitigating equipment.
or would it be possible to, instead of doing that, can we just, require different setbacks for pickleball courts from property lines? I think that would be a
Probably
much,
do whatever you want, it's just a question of whether it would be effective.
I think that would be a much more reasonable and easier thing to deal with.
It would surprise me if the setbacks,
I don't think
Would
that's gonna
affect
make
it
a
in
bigger
any manner.
difference
Yeah.
because of the way sound travels.
and also the way so the dilemma as, like I was out with the meter with Dave, so my observation. That, we're standing 25 feet from the playing area.
Mhm.
And the sound is not triggering the meter, it's distinct, but not triggering the meter to a threshold. And then we go 400 yards away and the sound is equally distinct.
Yeah.
So that's what the residents say, the residents who live hundreds of yards away say that the sound is distinct and annoying. And that the setbacks aren't going to, I'd be very surprised if the setbacks would improve it. The pickleball enthusiasts, from what I'm hearing, would be more put upon by the requirement for equipment than by the conditional use. So that's just what you have to figure out as the community that, you know, some have said in this process where we all learn more about pickleball than we ever thought we would. Some have said the key is the equipment, and others have said, how can you tell us what equipment? Imagine trying to tell a tennis player that they need to string a racket to 45 pounds instead of 50 pounds.
Mhm.
And then how are we gonna enforce that? Are we gonna, have Colleen checking, equipment?
Yeah.
You know, so.
So I appreciate all of that, and I do appreciate that people are living near a pickleball court and maybe unhappy about it, and unfortunately, you're getting the complaints about it. I just am uncomfortable with the fact that so right now, we're targeting pickleball. And I do think technology is changing, and I know, we had the same issue in Florida at our condo complex, and there are different types of paddles and different types of balls that will mitigate some of that sound. But what if the next thing is, like I said, what if the next thing is, I don't wanna hear people playing basketball because they're bouncing the ball, maybe they're cheering too much, maybe they're doing whatever. And then it kind of becomes a slippery slope of, you know, tennis is okay, but pickleball's not. Well, basketball's really not okay, but maybe baseball is. And then, you know, where do we draw the line on that? So.
Okay, and again, I'm not trying to talk you, I'm just trying to help you
I
understand
understand.
it, don't, like,
And
don't
I
think,
guess the
hope you
question-
don't think I'm trying to talk you.
The question is, to me, is, what are other townships doing? How are they handling some of the complaints, or are they addressing that in
You can talk
ordinances?
to that a little bit, right, Colleen, some of the surrounding townships?
Some of the surrounding townships, I know a couple surrounding municipalities will have pickleball in their community centers, like East Goshen Park is a pickleball. I spoke to them, they don't receive any complaints because of the location and the distance from houses.
Sure.
Trinidad, they don't have any real pickleballs, I've spoken to my counterpart at that township. Euclid Township, which was brought up as a sample, what they did, because the YMCA in Euclid Township, they went through the conditional use process, but that wasn't specifically for pickleball. That was for sports complex in a residential neighborhood, right, a residential district.
Sure.
So to make a long story short, there aren't many municipalities in the surrounding area that have an ordinance pertaining to pickleball. I've reached out to Concord Township because I know they have pickleball courts, Concord Township, Delaware County, because I know they have pickleball courts at their municipal complex. And you know, they don't have a specific ordinance pertaining to pickleball for the development of it.
Yeah.
They regulate it through, specifically the zoning person at Concord Township said if they receive a complaint, they handle it through noise. So, which they don't receive many complaints because of the location.
And also it's new to the township, I mean, new-ish to the township, so.
It's new in general, Stacy. I mean, I hear what you say about basketball and tennis, they've been around for 100 years. I don't think anyone's gonna come out of the woodwork and say basketball is bothering them, and let's get an ordinance for basketball.
And there is some thought, you know, again, just we all learn more about this, and that the mechanics of the pickleball are different than the mechanics of the tennis ball strike. Anecdotally, I see that the neighbors who complain about it say that. The neighbors who complain say, hey, we lived next to it till Y for years. The tennis ball doesn't bother us.
Right.
The pickleball does, so.
It's a different type of pitch.
Yeah,
And that's what we have an issue with our condo complex,
Yeah.
so I understand it and I get that, but I do know that there's also a lot of technology with rackets, with balls that can mitigate that, and I just feel like this is over regulating. And maybe there's a way to, you know, handle that through noise. Like if you get a complaint or something regarding a sports or some sort of sports activity and not necessarily naming pickleball, and then requiring that someone would mitigate it through other types of equipment. I don't know what that answer is, but this seems, to me, it feels very overregulated.
Yeah, as I said, I think it's too expansive and all encompassing and, it's trying to kill an ant with a sledgehammer.
I'm comfortable with it. All it really is saying is if you want to do this, you gotta ask in advance and provide a noise abatement plan. And clearly the existing noise ordinance isn't covering it for our township. The Board of Supervisors floated this, wrote it, submitted it, it's in legal, it's in the paper. So there's obviously a reason for this particular thing with pickleball that is unrelated to other sports activities. And clearly our noise ordinance has failed. So I don't know, unless you have an option that you want to recommend a change to the noise ordinance. We already know it fails, but maybe, if you don't want this, there are a bunch of people out there saying we got to do something.
I'm sure that there's other ways that the ideals, or what they're trying to accomplish with this could be done, without painting such a broad stroke.
Yeah, I don't,
And as I mentioned, I hate the fact that this requires a residential property owner to have to go through conditional use to add a pickleball court in their backyard, but, they could go and add a bunch of other stuff and not have to go through conditional use, this is, it's very specific, and that worries me.
I think that represents the technology that Stacy's talking about. If you think about pickleball as a new technology, a new sport, we're in the adoption curve and using it and how it influences the quality of life for neighbors, and our existing regulations don't make it work for everybody in the township. And what this is asking someone to say is, regardless if you're residential or you're the Y or you're a sports complex, if you want to do this, you need a noise abatement program. It's not saying you can't do it. You just need a noise abatement program.
It's not just a noise abatement program, it's also an entire conditional use hearing.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it, Mike, though, that it's based on your noise abatement program, whether or not you get the conditional use approval.
but
I mean, if someone came in here to me and suggested they were gonna do this and they were gonna have acoustic blankets around it, use the, like the Y can provide all the paddles, so you don't bring your own paddle, provide softballs. And then they could go out there and demonstrate that it was quieter. I wouldn't have any problem approving a conditional use for it. So I mean, it seems to me like it provides a path for all parties that they could satisfy themselves.
I mean, look, if this thing was limited to pickleball complexes of more than one, of two courts and.
Okay, that's a good suggestion,
That'd be a
something like
completely
that.
different thing, but the fact that this is limited to any pickleball use is what is causing me great pause and concern. I do not, like, if you're talking about a commercial pickleball, I mean, if somebody's trying to build a commercial pickleball facility in the residential areas with more than one court, fine, you require them to go to conditional use, but for a residential property owner to do it in their backyard, that's a completely different story, requiring them to go through conditional use. For a commercial use in our commercial zoning that's indoors, I don't think that they should have to go through conditional use solely because it's for pickleball, when it's gonna be enclosed indoors.
Yeah, that one doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I think they're noise.
So then that's why this could be. This could be cleaned up and
Colleen, do you
Revise
remember,
and-
there was an explanation for that, I think that was intended to capture a specific, I don't remember, that came up, I don't remember the full explanation.
Yeah.
But it was intended to capture like some kind of like, that idea of like you have a structure and you just put sides on it. And do you recall?
I don't recall.
So we just don't recall the origin of that particular provision.
couple things I'd like to add and risk of piling on a little bit, but I just think that when the conditional use process is not just, hey, you need to say you've taken a mitigation plan. It's thousands and thousands of dollars, even
Yeah.
for the most trivial of conditional uses. It's a public hearing, it's notices to all the neighbors, it's a long waiting period. And there are 17 criteria that are the standards for review of a conditional use. And I think you'd be strained to apply maybe one, maybe two of those 17 criteria. That they're about traffic demands, they're about, it's the wrong process for what is a specific problem of noise, in my opinion. And then you're also taking a specific recreational activity and effectively making it very, very difficult for people to actually engage in. And I think that's why I don't like the method of dealing with the problem. And it's basically, it's a more, what this functionally is a moratorium.
It's exactly what it is. Because it is
So let's call it
thousands
that, and
and
at least
thousands of dollars.
At least say what it is, and I would be opposed to a moratorium. I think you deal with it in the details of the noise ordinance. I'm not an expert, but reading the noise ordinance, there's like 4 different categories of noise. If this is something that most noises when you're 200 feet away versus being 60 feet away are radically different, and this one is not. I mean, I get that. That might be, I don't live near the pickleball courts, so I'm not trying to minimize the concerns. I just think that that's something about how that particular noise travels that should be dealt with there, not with what's functionally a moratorium or a cumbersome process that's just taking a land development process for subjective uses that don't fall into specific criteria and then applying it to a very, very specific use.
My gut would tell me that the supervisors would very much want to hear if it changed, if your opinion changed, if it somehow got limited to commercial. Because there's a sizable difference between, somebody in their yard and the impact of that and a commercial facility.
If it was limited to commercial, but as I mentioned that I have a problem with the indoor thing.
We just have to get to the bottom of that, get that, we'll try to get you that explanation.
I have a problem with it being in.
To the extent, yeah, it was applied to like a recreational commercial use. That is something dealing with that kind of group activity that may have an impact on neighbors because of that use isn't really a residential use, then yes, I think that is more, we're now more talking about something that should go through a conditional use process.
Right.
If
But
this
just
was,
saying
if this was
you
for
draw
places
lines
where
of a certain
people,
size and put a net up.
if this was for places
like
where
that.
people were paying fees to play pickleball in residential zone properties,
That's a different
that'd be a completely different thing.
Yeah, it's an important distinction, because I do think that's
If this is,
as person was like at all of these meetings, I think that was the intent. There was a recognition that they also wanted to capture that remote single location. But perhaps that is, if it's a threshold issue, then you just identify the key threshold.
but I mean, when you're requiring it in PBL and DB and, if somebody could theoretically purchase one of the, I mean, there's that big indoor facility right at 29 and 30, that got converted to pickleball.
But it's completely indoors.
Yeah, it's completely indoors, and
I think
I
those
mean-
would be uses we want.
if something like that were to happen, requiring an entire conditional use on it just solely because it's a pickleball use seems a little. As if that was to happen in the PBO, I just don't think that's necessary or what the intent of this is. So I do think that this could be amended and make it much more palatable. But as it is currently constructed, I am not in favor of it.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I think I said my piece and
Fair enough to characterize some of the concern is you saw it as too broad in its reach. And it doesn't mean you would support something that was more narrow, but you're less likely to oppose it with the same vigor that you have now. if it was narrowed.
Yeah, I think if it was around, I think commercial use for this type of purpose, then that is something that makes sense from a zoning perspective. If it's regulating, it seems like you're regulating an activity through zoning. That's what sort of, I'm struggling with.
I think all activities are regulated through zoning though.
Yeah, that's a normal process, yeah.
Every activity we have is regulated, so that's the reason why it's being regulated through zoning.
I think, I'll put it this way, I think that this could be, narrowed considerably and still have its intended effect and not have a
And it sounds like,
unintended effect on the rest
It's all
of
pretty good feedback, I think.
and the issues are in commercial applications, not residential, like I set up a pickleball. net
Anecdotally,
on
I
my
get that sense,
driveway.
because, in part because, again, just anecdotal observation. What I think part of the dilemma is the, like my neighbor does annoying stuff, but he leaves 2 hours later and it's fine.
Yeah.
But if it's at the Y, it's, what the neighbors are saying is it starts at 8 o'clock and it stays till 9 o'clock and it's just perennial.
Yeah.
So if you have 20 courts doing it, that's entirely different than one court
Completely
doing it.
different.
I do think the noise ordinance would cover the neighbor situation, so I like the commercial feedback. I agree with that. It's really just seems to be related to that.
Yeah, I would just remind everyone that it's easy to say, look, conditional use
Yeah.
process makes sense, people to weigh in. It's really onerous. It is, you're talking $10,000+ just to get attorneys and do surveys and.
And that's some of the logic behind your threshold concern, that's
Yes.
more applicable for a commercial entity than it is for somebody trying to recreate in their backyard.
Correct, and then to the extent we're looking at that type of commercial use and the impact it could have on neighbors, this seems like to just pick on this one particular activity. That's why I feel like it's the wrong tool for the job, personally.
So,
Is this on a supervisor's agenda yet?
Yes, it's on a supervisor's agenda, it's been advertised, right?
Yeah.
It's advertised, it went to the Chester County Planning Commission.
Yeah, so,
I think you need to make a motion then, that you're not in favor of the ordinances currently drafted.
and if you have specifics, you can recommend that, because when this was decided, again, purposefully, it was decided to advertise it, and if the feedback changes, then they'll just re-advertise it. If they get your feedback and they decide to incorporate it, they'll just direct us to incorporate it and then re-advertise it. So up to you if you want to include, what you think are positive recommendations that would make it better. Or negative recommend, or things that you want to take it out to make it better.
My recommendation is specific to pickleball and the noise that pickleball generates, that it should be an amendment to the noise ordinances. I personally.
So Bill, kind of, that's like, this has a fatal flaw, like it's not a judge, it's not like nobody's, but it's just for you, this is a fatal flaw that it can't be nuanced to be made better because of that fatal flaw of it's not using numbers and it's specific to pickleball.
Yeah, I think that's well put, Don, and that the concern about it, if someone came to us with a facility that's, I don't know all the code, but I would suspect that would probably be a conditional use anyway. But you could apply a bunch of other criteria to the traffic and et cetera, but just using this CU process just specifically for something that generates noise is what I'm struggling with.
But I don't think it matters about zoning would be the commercial use of pickleball.
there's two things, I think the two things that would make me comfortable with an ordinance doing this would be first of all, that removing that indoor book on it. And then the second thing would be limiting the scope of it to multi-court
I
users
would just say commercial
or
use. Yeah.
multi-court users or commercial slash fee-paying facilities located within residential zones.
And Tom, nothing that you're aware of that would prevent that from, is there anything about that that?
No, I think what you're suggesting that if you would require conditional use approval, if it was a, a country club, the
If it was
YMCA,
in
commercial
In the
activity.
residential zones, I
Yeah.
don't think that, I don't think, an indoor pickleball facility in the PBO should require conditional use.
A dilemma you'd have with that though is that your zoning is so tight that if you're in any one of these, you're just right around the corner from.
I think you would have to have it, because really, when you look at the village is so narrow.
Yeah.
And I mean, literally, you're one block off and you're in transitional,
Yeah,
and then a half a block later,
Okay,
you're in
then
residential,
let's do
so.
this, then how about just do 2 or more pickleball courts? Require the conditional use, I mean, that would be,
But to me, it has to be for commercial use.
yeah, 2 or more
and
pickleball courts for.
it's very unlikely anybody would build 2 pickleball courts for a non-commercial use.
Exactly.
Well, I know, I don't even know that you have to say that.
Capture, yeah,
I think you could just say pickleball courts used for commercial use would need a conditional use, but there would need to be some other,
and what
Massaging
would
on
fall out would be the single property owner who.
Is not going to be using it 8 hours a day.
Yeah, who might not comply and neighbors disagree all the time.
Yeah.
But it would capture a scenario like the Y or a repeat of the Y in which you had a large facility
Yeah.
with perennial all day play.
Right, I mean,
I mean,
here's like recreational facilities is already a definition of a
Yes.
use. I get that if this is specific to that, something you wanna tighten up around that, yes, but.
So I think maybe I'll try this, that a motion to, not recommend adoption of the ordinances in its current form and suggest that some of the concerns be addressed in the noise ordinance, that you remove any conditional use requirement for indoor facilities, and that the conditional use process and approval be limited to commercial and recreational facilities, something like that.
yeah,
containing more than 2
I mean,
courts.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't think it has to, I don't think you have to limit the number of courts, because I think if it is a commercial use,
Yeah.
that's all that is gonna matter. Cause if you're gonna put one in your, commercial would be that it's gonna be 8 hours a day.
because there could be some, club that only has one course, but they're using it 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day.
Right.
I mean, I know of the situation in Euclid Township where it's a private swim club and they put the courts right on next to residential houses.
Yeah.
And they're going crazy.
Okay,
Alright, well, I make a motion that we.
do that.
Yeah.
Motion made and
By our solicitor.
Yeah, that's fine.
A second.
What's the motion? I'm sorry.
You're gonna make me repeat it, aren't you?
No, that's okay. You just said what Tom said earlier? You made
Yes.
it into that? Okay.
Yes,
Second it.
Is you okay with that, Chris?
Yeah, I just seconded it.
You understood what he said? Okay, alright, so. I made the motion, who seconded it?
For a second.
Chris seconded, any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next Tom.
Sure.
Next item on the agenda is the LSA grant update for Village of Berwyn, Route 30, Carter, complete street stuff.
That was the PBO.
You skipped the
Sorry, I
C.
skipped it, sorry. Okay, next item on the agenda is the PBO, Devon Center Zoning Comprehensive Plan Alignment.
bad about this, I guess we can talk about how we, and what the next step is to advance this.
Yes. Don, we had spoke,
Probably 2 months ago.
yeah. Any thoughts about what the next step is that we need to do to keep this moving forward?
I think the next step is to communicate the concept to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay.
If it doesn't need to exceed 2 pages, if it's a paragraph to 2 pages at most, generally describing what you want to do with enough detail to allow the supervisors and the public to know what you want, but not so much detail that you get sidetracked arguing about stuff before you decide even what to argue.
So a thought then around that, which is, so in the 2018 comprehensive plan, one of the subsections is, establish a vision for Devon Center. In that, they have there's an image that has the footprint of what they established as that area in that subsection of the comp plan. I would suggest that in order to achieve what's laid out, that a zoning change for that outlined area should be studied. That'd be sort of the first step. Yeah, I can bring it up, so, yeah, bear with me for a second.
I also think it'd be great to really look at a map.
Yeah.
And look at the parcels that are there, and really look at how many parcels do we think is really gonna be affected by any kind of zoning change there. Because, we've also may be talking about very few parcels that are going to be changed.
I mean, I can bring it up on my iPad, but the comp plan does have a.
Yeah.
Exactly what you're talking about, say, Sandy, we could look at, it's not in the zoning map,
There you go.
Bill, did the process not identify a handful of maps that differ? Generally, they were sort of generally the same, but the line moved depending upon the month and the year and the discussion, might have moved marginally. But I wasn't aware that there was a single map that would capture the Devon Center.
And there may not be, but on page 51. There isn't, figure 6.1 is an aerial photograph of Devon Center. I don't know, Colleen, it's in the comp plan, and it is pretty broad. It basically goes to the township line, Valley Forge Road and Berkeley. So it does capture that corner of the horse show through Arlington on the south side of Lancaster. And this says this sort of funny
51.
panhandle on it, which I
It's
think
page-
grabs that,
51.
is page, it's number 49, it's 51 of the PDF, it's number 49 in the document. So 51 of the PDF. So, cause I was with you, Don, and thought, and I'm sure there was, I'm not, I'm sure.
Yeah, okay.
Not sure if everyone would say this is Devon Center, but this is what the comp plan has as the figure for
Yeah.
aerial photograph of Devon Center under this chapter 6, establish a vision for Devon Center.
Is that the parking lot of the train station that?
It is.
Right.
Yeah,
That
this
is
is
the
that
parking lot of the
little,
train
yeah,
station.
right.
And that does include the parking lot for the horse show and the horse show.
So, right, it probably only is a couple dozen.
Bill, I'm sorry, I have it pulled up on my iPad. What figure is it again?
It's labeled as figure 6-1, aerial photograph of Devon Center. I don't know, Colleen, if you could share the screen you're sharing with us.
I don't think I can.
No,
grab
okay.
Where we are.
I'm sure I could find it, yeah.
But it's like, there's a red border around it, Chris, sort of a light black crosshatch infill.
Kind of captures the spirit of it, kind of captures what.
And I'm not saying this is what it has to be, but it seems like a good starting point.
You
is
have
in
to
the
have a
comp
starting point, and it has to be tangible.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
among the list of things I came to tell you today was that 1 to 2 page, if it were me, I would include some kind of map with some kind of line showing the boundary,
Mhm.
and not necessarily like die on that red line, but this is the starting point
Right.
of the Devon Center.
Because I think what what I've heard in the last few months trying to, some of the feedback is, hey, we did a lot of work years ago and a lot of work on this comp plan. And I don't think there's anything that certainly I'm not, and I don't think can't speak for the others on the commission, but we're not trying to bend this and go a different direction. We're trying to say that the PBO zoning, which currently covers everything in this except for the horse show,
Right,
doesn't actually, if you read all of the 6-3 goals and objectives on the next page, I'd be hard pressed to say that any of them are achieved by PBO zoning.
PBO is suburban style zoning, and what you have all said is you want village style zoning around Devon.
Yeah, or even just looking at the objectives of the vision for Devon Center, which are not, if you read them from that comp plan, are not consistent with PBO zoning, but they don't say conventional suburban zoning, minimizing traffic. They say is advance an identity for Devon Center. Maintain a transition between existing residential uses that are set back and the intensity in use directly along Route 30. And I would argue this actually does the opposite, right? You just have a hard line between conventional suburban PBO zoning and R3 zoning. There is nothing in that code that maintains a transition at all. Refine the pedestrian network to facilitate safe travel and connections between neighborhoods, the train station and other key destinations. PBO zoning basically incentivizes you to put surface parking everywhere. Doesn't do that. So that's why, the more I thought about it, more the feedback I heard is like, well, let's start with exactly what the headline on this agenda is. It's alignment of the zoning with what's in the comp.
yes.
Make sense?
So to me, that makes great sense. And then the next question is, what's the zoning that goes into that red square? And does VB become the way that red line from the comp plan is the starting point? Is the VB zoning the starting point for the zoning that goes into that red line? Because the VB zoning presumably does capture the elements of the comp plan that
Sure.
are not captured in PBO.
Yeah, I think it does some of that, but I think where I think we could say, here are the major factors that make sense from that we could lift in place from the VB zoning, but I think we can't take all of them. And I think the goals that need separate thought and probably expertise from consultants to come up with what it actually looks like are the things like designing a transition, the pedestrian network, those kinds of things, that are much more complicated that aren't consistent with what VB zoning. If you just drop VB zoning here, it wouldn't necessarily do that. And I think
So,
I heard feedback, some people don't like the idea of applying
right.
VB zoning.
I mean, I feel like what they're trying to accomplish and what we're talking about and what people in general would like in Devon is to have a little downtown like we have in Berwyn, which they don't have. It is a drive-through. I do think that we could look at what we've done in Berwyn with our transitional zone, which certainly could give a cushion between what would be more commercial and where the R3 is. So if you're looking along Berkeley, maybe that drop down to Berkeley, maybe you took that line that comes off of Fairfield and went straight across, and I don't know how that happens or if it has to follow the property lines or whatever, but maybe that becomes more of a transitional area where you could have light commercial, but not necessarily as intensive.
Are you concerned that you meet great resistance if you take someone's residential property and you change the zoning to?
I think anything we even talk about in Devon, we are gonna get great resistance from that.
I would just be very surprised if, I just think that would be a non-starter. I think it would be a non-starter to take a residential property and convert it into a,
But what I'm saying is if we're including that area in this red line here, it would seem like there should be some transition at somewhere, what would be north of Berkeley.
So what Stacy said, and I agree, and I think the reality is, so this is the church. I don't think that should be rezoned This is an office building on the corner, but we acknowledge Berkeley's basically residential street. These are, actually, there might be separate parcels here. This is all one that is residentially zoned. This is, I think, all one that is residentially zoned. And then this is all PBO with the exception of the houses here. So I would say just because you don't have like a row of parcels that you would have a separate zoning code, I think you would have to look at anything that fronts Berkeley. I think everybody agrees, we don't want commercial uses on Berkeley. So if there's one parcel that fronts Lancaster where you want commercial uses and fronts Berkeley where you don't, you'd have to build in some setbacks or requirements of how you could develop that parcel such that any commercial use or mixed use or what have you is where it belongs. You could also avoid putting the parking garage that was proposed right on that corner. You could have those types of requirements in the code. That's getting into some of the details. But I think that's the only way to really solve this problem, because the way that it's not like in Berwyn where you had kind of a nice block of separate parcels where it made sense to zone them as a transitional zoning area. You just don't have that granularity.
But you do have some offices
Yeah.
and I mean, clearly, like, I think in the transitional zoning, there's like a bed and breakfast and like, it's softer uses that are still commercial, but like a church is still a commercial use,
Yeah.
but not, it doesn't need to be a store. or
So
it-
no
it doesn't-
VB at all in that?
What's that?
No VB at all, no VB like zoning in the Devon Center at all, just
Oh, for sure you would,
transitional.
no, for sure you would have Devon, you would, I mean, it is the main thoroughfare. It is already retail oriented in a lot of areas just by how it's developed over time. But what my point is that there should be north of Berkeley, some sort of transition that would be softer
Yeah.
usage, but
So-
could, kind of step into commercial a little bit, but would transition then into the residential
So
area.
the logic of Berwyn, and that Berwyn has the VB down the center,
And
and
then
then on
has
either side it
VP,
has, and it's only a property thick, like VP might
exactly,
be a
that's
property
all it
thick.
would need to be.
That's the vision that you have for it. But it's,
I think that's something, yeah, that's something we would work through once do you think we should be like looking at the BB zoning and redlining it for the stuff that we don't like for Devon Center, or is that something like a planning
it
consultant?
might be too deep, like trying to find the sweet spot.
Right.
So that might be too, at no point in this do you want to be redlining a document, like, do you
Right.
want a draft document in
Yeah.
which you're putting, you want paragraphs and concepts. So to describe the paragraph would be, that inside that red line is zoning that is more along the line to village. It would have, more concentrated commercial activities along the Route 30 corridor
Right.
and transitional activities on the periphery of that in a manner that is aligned to the village zoning that has that, some kind of description like
Yeah, I
that.
think to the extent we're applying that, it's mostly around just allowable uses. But I think when you get into any of the specifics of density, setbacks, those types of things, it's parking, we have to look at that with fresh eyes, in my opinion. But in terms of the use cases, we could look at VB and VT as sort of inspiration for that.
My logic for thinking that it's prudent for you to rely on VB and VT is that it survived the scrutiny of previous process. So it's sort of like, you're more likely to win when you bring, hey, this came out in 2018 and people didn't object to it. It's more likely to win the day now. I think you're more likely to win the day with the idea that, hey, we're moving VB and VT over. You can nuance it for sure, but the more you deviate from something that's already proven and demonstrated, the more likely you are to run into a fatal flaw.
And the other thing we're gonna find is that if you look at different zoning that goes right past Valley Forge Road, I mean, it's very similar to VB. It is geared towards commercial use,
Yeah,
it's
I
geared
actually
towards
haven't
retail.
researched that.
And so it definitely would then, Devon wouldn't, people don't even know that there's Easttown and Tredyffrin half the time. They don't know where the line is. And so it certainly would make that area feel more consistent as you're traveling through the townships.
Okay.
Sounds like they already think they're the same, Stacy. You just said they can't even tell the difference.
Yeah.
That seems to be that would mean they're pretty consistent today.
Mhm.
Is
Yeah,
that what you're saying?
No, I mean, the horse show is R3. It's different from everything around it.
It's actually very problematic.
And I
It's out of
think,
place.
I'm just gathering from, having been at a lot of these things. I think you all, if someone were to redevelop the horse show property, I think you want that redeveloped in a manner that is in R3 zoning, correct? I think that's
I do not want that to be.
you can't, like, if you take that property and you put 20 houses on it, then you won't have a Devon Center, so.
Right.
I'm gathering that needs to be included. Now, I don't know what the horse show's reaction to that is, but that's why you have a process, you find out.
Well, that's why I think, look, we acknowledge that in this border, there's a lot of different borders. The train tracks on one side, you got dense residential, less dense, it's a hodgepodge of stuff, right? But we gotta start somewhere, and this was identified as in the comp plan. And I think we have to be respectful of the different borders of it as we go through this process. And that's where I think a consultant can help. We can say VB and, the business district aspect and the transitional aspect of the village VB and VT zoning is, got through the township process. We like that concept, but we acknowledge that this is just a different kettle of fish. And we need a fresh look at what that actually looks like on paper to achieve the same objectives. It can't be just copy and paste.
Yeah, that'd be good. In the same way, you could adjust the line, like you're not adjusting the line, you're
I got no
adjusting the
problems with
VB. The red line is the starting point, the VB and the VT, and the logic of that concentration and transition is the starting point. Use the red line and that existing zoning as the starting point, and then have a thoughtful approach as to why you would change the line or
Correct.
why you would make adjustments to
Why
both
you have
sides.
transitional zones, and there definitely should be transitional zones. The one on Berkeley, the one I think is the most obvious, I care the most about, certainly the ones. I mean, it's a little bit of a harder line where Devon Lanes is and stuff, there's already a pretty hard transition between the commercial use and those homes. But yes, this is that center, we just acknowledge that it's not homogeneous, you need to have this transitional border to it.
Right.
Is that and does that hit the sweet spot between like concept defined enough?
It does for me, because I've been paying attention for a while, so my gut would tell me yes, my gut would tell me that a paragraph to a page and a map would capture the spirit of what you want to do. Colleen and I would assign a consulting cost to it, and then it would just become a prospective project for the supervisors to consider. Given the somewhat controversial nature of this in the past, I don't know if it would just wait till October in budget season or whether they would want to evaluate it beforehand.
And I get that process. The one thing I feel pretty strongly about that I think isn't broadly appreciated is just how different what's currently allowable is, and what just the kinds of things that could happen with what's on the books now are very much at odds with this comp plan, which is now 7 years old and nothing's been done about it. So that's where I feel strongly that I get this. It's not a fun process. It's expense. I'm not the supervisor's job is to prioritize those things and make those decisions. But I just think it's a can that we kick at our own risk.
And that's the, like, from me as the outsider looking in, that's part of why I want to be involved, because I see you all agreeing on that. I see you all concerned by poor development in that area, all of you wanting, village type zoning, all of you troubled by, hey, what happens if that one developer comes in and we miss the window? I also think that I think you have common ground. I think that you can, if you compromise, I think you can find a solution that, makes this doable.
So,
So do you and Colleen put together this paragraph that we just talked about, and then we,
Since I tend to be the most righteous know-it-all in the room, it's probably appropriate for us to take a stab at it,
yes,
as long as you're comfortable with the spirit of what I'm into, because always know, I am never trying to tell you all how to live. I am trying to facilitate, hear what you telling me you want to do, and then facilitate that.
yeah,
So what I'm hearing you tell me is that, you all agree that the Devon Center zoning is problematic because it's incompatible with, the comp plan, and because it runs the risk of, bad development, or development that you find contrary to the comp plan. You'd like to see the zoning changed, aligned to village type zoning, using the starting point of VB and VT, both in the concept of concentration and transitions, and the village style zoning that, that occurs there. And you'd like to use the red line in figure 6.2 as the starting point of the perspective change. And then what you want is a consultant to guide you through the process that would help you nuance the text and nuance the line.
yes.
correct. And I just acknowledge that in order to get the consensus and feedback to nuance the text and nuance the line, that's a relatively big project that hopefully we could make some progress on as a community, independent of, at the same time that you guys are going through the budgeting process and saying this is something that we eventually need consultants to help with.
Okay, and then my 2 cents for that would be to, when you make that recommendation to the supervisors, specifically tell them that. Because I don't think that, I don't think you should start down a project
Yeah.
that the supervisors don't want you to start down. So
Absolutely.
tell them that, because there is lots of stuff that you could do to educate yourselves on how to nuance that line. And then, if they think it's a project worth doing, they would tell you that you could start immediately. And, the money part needs to delay, it would come later.
Do we have a lot going on in the pipeline?
There's a couple applications that will be, in front of you in the next couple months.
Yeah.
You have what I'm gonna talk about next is the LSA grant. So,
But I mean, so what's the opinion on, asking the supervisors to do this before the end of the year, or as opposed to just waiting for the budget season, like?
No, I do it right now. You wanna, it'll be, we'll bring this back to you next month, that's May. You don't have to like it immediately, like you can say, okay, that's great, we want blank and blank, it's
Yeah.
June. It's July or August before it's at the supervisor, so you're already pushing up, I would say just start at it
Yeah.
and get feedback from them.
But I guess what I'm getting at is there a chance that the supervisor will be able to allocate for the consultant before the end of the year? And we could get moving on?
It's
before the end of the
it's
year?
not terribly expensive, and there's planning capital money, and that's fungible.
Yeah.
So it's not out of the question. And it's not a sizable amount of money,
Okay.
it's measured in a handful of tens of thousands at most. It would surprise me if it's even that.
Okay.
So the answer is yes, it's possible, whether they do it, I don't know.
I mean, the most important thing to me is that hey, there is acknowledgement that we have this
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
real comp plan, and we have things, we have business to do, and
Yeah.
that everyone's engaged in doing that. And then it'll be a messy process full of compromise and ironing out the details, but I don't wanna go through that process and then repeat past, which is said, let's just leave it as it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that might lend itself to taking the longer route to getting started, because it's not just the expertise of the person telling you where the line should
Yeah.
be, it's the process of the person nuancing the line with your input and the public's
And
input.
the feedback I've heard in trying to piece together what the resistance to the past efforts, a lot of it was process related, fair and unfair, I don't know. But just, so I do want to be deliberate about making sure we are getting all of the feedback, good, bad, and ugly, and incorporate it into this process and not have it feel like we've put the cart before the horse. So I'm okay being patient from that perspective. What I'm worried about, like I said, is doing that work and then giving up.
One bit of advice on that is, avoiding you've already made the decision, like it's really, you've already decided as a community that
Right,
this
this
troubles
was
you. So,
one of the full chapters. in the
yeah, it's
conflict.
that part, like, so I guess, I would want to be guarded against going back to another day of putting, the green dots on the things you like and the red dots on the things you don't like. That shouldn't be this exercise. This
Right.
exercise should propel from the comp plan and from the last exercise. It should overcome the things that were your hurdles in the last exercise to achieve the outcome that's clearly specified in your comp plan. So it has more focus than it did 8 years ago when it was, you determining that this is what you wanted.
Okay.
So we're good?
Yeah, I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, no,
feedback.
that's good.
All right, so we'll come back to something at the May meeting.
Okay.
I'll draft to something.
Thank you.
It's fantastic.
All
Thank
right,
you.
do this again. Next item on the agenda, the LSA grant update for the Village of Berwyn 30 Carter Complete Street Study.
So a couple months ago, I guess several months ago, the township was awarded an LSA grant through the state. It's a local shares account grant funding. And what it's gonna do is, we're gonna utilize that money to conduct a study along Route 30, from about Leopard, I think I have it up. So it's the entire length of the VB district, so it'd be about from here to Lakeside. So
Nice.
all along here, they're gonna, we have signed an agreement with Bowman and Comida, and they are going to prepare, obtain a survey of Route 30 and prepare essentially a study to see if a road diet would be feasible in that section, or just a streetscape, or what can be done along Route 30. What it is strictly a study, so we're not designing anything, we're not finalizing anything, we're not gonna construct anything, it's just a study, we're in phase 1, just to have an idea of what we have and what can be done in the future, if wanted. Within the next several months, Bowman will be attending planning commission meetings to give updates, to get feedback, possibly holding, public workshops, just to, show the progress and whatnot. So next month, Bowman and Committa will be here, to give you a more detailed, idea of what they're gonna do, what their whole project is going to do, what their scope of work, an anticipated timeline, and what you guys should expect. Okay, so I did, instead of just having them show up next month and surprise you with this new project, I thought it would be a good idea to kind of, give you a little buffer so you can think about it and be prepared next month, okay?
Your group is one of the mechanisms for the public outreach component. So, purposefully chosen not to create a special group. Why not use the group that's been doing this? So, there's waypoints set in, so, it's not, they do their work and then they report the outcome to us. They do work, they report, you give them feedback, they do more work, you give them, so there's 2 or 3 waypoints in the middle where they're reporting to the public through a chain of command process. You're one of the steps in the chain of command.
Great. Next item on the agenda is liaison reports. You have anything for Pep Like or?
No, Nick had the minutes from it.
The pet bike, I can give a
Yeah.
little summary, I attended, they talked a little bit about Sharps Woods, just to see, where the township was with, the possible thoughts of pedestrian bridges or improvements in there. It was just reported that we're in the beginning stages, we're just cleaning up dead trees at this point. They talked about the sidewalk along, Waterloo to Lancaster Avenue. So that's going from Berkeley to, Route 30 and that intersection with the sidewalk and the ADA improvements. We discussed a little bit of the U-shaped corridor sidewalk project, which we're almost in the bidding stages of that. We're very close to that. And then, we also discussed, sidewalk along South Fairfield in the school
Yeah.
district. So that was kind of mentioned, that was tossed around, and also sidewalk along, Conestoga Road.
Yeah, actually, thanks for reminding me, Colleen, that the one thing we didn't talk about was there, some of the residential streets, like near where I live, Berkeley, and I used to walk my kids to Devon Elementary, it's like, those are low traffic streets. There's a sidewalk in front of my house, which probably 50% of the people actually use, like the other 50% just walk along the street because they're used to walk, the rest of the block, they walk along the street. So just, we're just kind of discussing, in certain situations, just traffic calming is probably a better solution than trying to get grants and a long process of putting sidewalks in. It's like, it's already there. And then we did look at the sidewalk extension and that stop sign between Berkeley and Fairfield. And I don't know if you mentioned that I said it gets run all the time, but I've now saw in the last month, 2 police officers pull people over in front of my house. Thank you for policing that. But there'll
There's a
be,
lot of authority around here.
yeah, I don't know if I didn't, but they're gonna paint, as part of that grant, there will be crosswalks painted. Right now, it is a 4-way stop, but there is no crosswalks painted, so I think that will help with the traffic along Waterloo, which can be a little hair raising.
Yes.
You had any?
Historic, nothing of note.
I watched the supervisor meeting today to key me in on the pickleball stuff. I think that was the only thing that they talked about that was political cause.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that, I believe that's true. They talked about like the trash, putting the trash bin out.
Yeah, and I think
The road program, they talked about the road program.
Did they get a couple proposals for streetscaping or whatever it is? I saw the one from Bowman and one from TCA, Tom Comita.
That's the LSA.
That's the LSA grant, Chris, that's the,
Oh, it
grant
is?
that will be, debuted next month.
How do they determine which one to take, Colleen, out of curiosity?
They're using both. So Bowman is doing, the, I guess the majority of the work, like the survey, the possibility of the street corridor or the road diet and traffic analysis and all of that. And Tom Comita will do his planning determination. So they're pairing together. So we didn't pick one or the other. It was a combination of both.
And hopefully complementary skills, the
Yeah.
landscape architect brings things that the engineers don't, and vice versa.
Makes sense.
I saw the timeline just for the rest of the guys, 15 months for the activity, I think, from the start to the council meeting plan adoption.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Okay, next item, public comment. Do we have any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, May 6th, 2025 at 7 p.m. Thanks, adjourned.
It's like.
Thanks,
All right.
take care.